This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. And what I'm looking at today is 2022's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, directed by Scott Raimi. And overall, I like this movie, though it had a few issues. None of them preventing me from doing so, but nonetheless, things that didn't quite sync for me. Though those things I should mention are all relatively minor and shouldn't prohibit you from enjoying the movie. What bugged me first off is the title. Well, I should say the part of the title which is Multiverse of Madness, because this movie has elements of the multiverse, but it's not about the multiverse. And that's fine in and of itself, but that the movie promotes itself as such is a bit deceptive. For instance, Spider-Man No Way Home is a great title. It tells you so much just in that group of words. Once you see the movie, you get it. It makes sense. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is not. It's somewhat deceptive and playing upon the latest trend. And I think it becomes, at points, too much of the Marvel machine chugging away. For instance, we're introduced to America Chavez, who has the ability to enter other universes, but lacks the knowledge to understand how she does it. In other words, it happens when she's typically very stressed and afraid. It just feels more like Marvel throwing stuff at us. And that kind of, it mildly irked me. It didn't bother me, and it didn't take me out the movie, though it irked me. That being said, Multiverse of Madness as a Doctor Strange movie probably works significantly better than the first Doctor Strange movie, directed by Scott Derrickson, because I get the feeling that Sam Raimi, in reality, is an odd dude. He's probably a very quirky person, and that manifests itself in this movie. And for a time, I was concerned that we'd get another Drag Me to Hell. Which is to say, a movie working too hard to be what it isn't. Thankfully, we don't get that in Multiverse of Madness. And Sam Raimi's oddness and quirkiness come out in full force. Which is a way of saying, this is a Sam Raimi movie. It's not overly manipulated, for lack of a better word, by Marvel Studios, as far as I can tell. So that's a good thing. Another good thing is that the color palette of this movie is bonkers. For a while, a lot of people have been saying that Marvel movies look the same, they feel the same, and there's an element of truth to that. The color palette tends to be very reserved, and there is a uniformity to the look of Marvel movies. I don't deny that. Till this movie. And I could argue the Eternals, but I won't. Though with Multiverse of Madness, it is bonkers in terms of its color palette. Bright reds, brilliant blues. It feels unlike a Marvel movie in terms of the way it's shot. It's very different and very welcome. I'm glad that the people who do say that Marvel movies all look the same have got to start swallowing crow at this point, because that's beginning to change. Though, as I said, there was a basis for that argument. Another thing, and this connects to Sam Raimi being odd, is that this movie is really kind of strange, pardon the pun, and it works really well for it. Scott Derrickson is a talented director, I think, but at the same time, he's a very regimented director. He doesn't lean into weirdness. And that's not to say his movies are bad. The ones that I've seen are not. But he has a very linear way of thinking, by my reckoning. Sam Raimi, not so much. This movie gets odd. Really odd. And it also gets violent. Not violent enough, by my reckoning, because as an American, I love violence in movies. Though it makes Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness probably the first Marvel horror movie, the thing is, it's hard to define what is or what isn't horror in many instances. Some movies have horror overtones, but aren't quite horror movies. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness could be argued to be a horror movie. A big summer blockbuster horror movie, but a horror movie nonetheless. Particularly with the way it handles certain characters. For instance, the Scarlet Witch. There's one instance of her appearing which is very much body horror. And it is CGI. But the thing is, it plays into the benefits of CGI. Which is to say, a real person's body couldn't quite bend and distort like her body did in this instance. There are other examples of it being a horror movie as well. And it's something that I think works well. And also that, and I know it's repetitious at this point, but this is a $200 million summer tentpole. The idea that they're going to go full-on horror is probably absurd, but they took it pretty close to the line. There's some really violent things that happen in this movie. And it's all for the better, because, as I said, I wanted more of it. I wanted it to go full-on horror, which it doesn't really do. For me, Doctor Strange is one of my favorite characters. And the fact that it literally out-earned, so far, the Batman is incredible to me. And frankly, it shouldn't be. This is not making any sense at all. But it's currently expected to pull in worldwide plus or minus $700 million from this weekend. Now keep in mind, this is a movie that's been out, I want to say, 2 weeks. So that's pretty remarkable. The odds are strong that it will hit $1 billion, if only because it will squeak its way to it. There's going to be an inevitable fall off of box office from week 1 to 2, but I don't think it's going to be enough to stop this movie from reaching $1 billion. And I think it deserves it. I've read some commentary that this is a Scarlet Witch movie. And this feels to me like people trying to have it both ways, in a sense that they will often go, the Marvel Universe has weak villains. And then, when they do have a strong villain, for instance Thanos from Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame, then suddenly it's the Thanos movie. It's like you can't win for losing. Give a villain room to breathe and time to give viewers to understand what they're about, and suddenly it's the villain's movie. Don't give characters room to breathe and to get a feel for what they're about, and suddenly your villain is underwhelming. As I said, you can't win for losing. And Scarlet Witch in this movie is fascinating to me, mainly because they do go all in on the horror. And she is a remarkable, I don't want to say evil, because her motivation actually makes sense for what she does, though she doesn't at all have any issue with killing as many people as she possibly can if they happen to get in her way. So that's interesting. I've also read online that some people call the appearance of the Illuminati in this movie fan service. I don't agree with that, if only because a lot of comic readers have probably not even heard of the Illuminati. But even if they did, it's an interesting thing. Did they need to be there? Probably not, but it was interesting to see them nonetheless. And there's a benefit to it. It showed me that John Krasinski does not make a very good Mr. Fantastic, and Ian Griffith from the Fantastic Four movies, which are often maligned and are better than people give them credit for, was a better Mr. Fantastic than he is, or was, I should say. So I'm hoping John Krasinski does not play Mr. Fantastic in the upcoming Fantastic Four movie, because he doesn't fit the character very well. Though, when all is said and done, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is a damn good movie, and it's also Sam Raimi being Sam Raimi, which is not something we often get, and it's such a good thing to see. So what do you think? This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow.